So welcome back to the Wave Podcast, guys. Today we have Mr. Ri-karlo Handy, who is the creator of the Handy Foundation, and we're going to get more into how that got started and his whole backstory going through that. But essentially, the reason we invited Ri-karlo on this podcast today was because of racism in America and all the different racial issues that Black and Brown people of color face, not only in today's world but as well as in the film industry. And especially with recent news with, Nuri Martinez saying anti-Black things and having to resign and everything, we thought that this would be a great opportunity to bring someone into the podcast who knows about the film industry, has been in the film industry for a while, and has some light on how he's helping people of color get into, the film industry. So if you could just introduce yourself to everyone so, they kind of have an idea of who you are, because you can obviously do it better than me.
So I'm Ri-karlo Handy. I've been in the film and television business in some form or fashion for about 22 years. Mm-hmm. Maybe, 20 some years. No, almost 30 years, actually. I'm lying because I was 14. I'm about to be 44 next year. So,
wow.
Yeah. So it'll be 30 years next year from like the first time I was on set learning or producing or directing anything. And I've never done anything else. So, when it comes to what I'm up to today, I'm still producing. I do produce podcasts and television series. I'm just a show called the Harlem Globetrotters Play It Forward, just premiered 2 weeks ago on NBC, the More You Know Saturday morning program. I have a podcast called Money Moves with iHeartRadio, and then we do a lot of digital content and have partnerships with a lot of different folks. But on my nonprofit side with the Handy Foundation, we do a lot of training. And we have a lot of partnerships with, everybody from Netflix to ITV and Fremantle. And so those are some of the studios that service, networks like CBS and NBC. And so, it was kind of like a perfect marriage because the things that I've been doing my whole life, kind of have been kind of like a training ground for what I'm doing with the foundation.
So how did, the foundation get started? Because a lot of people have seen, the front end of, TV and how Black and Brown people have been continuously getting in the camera more and, getting leading roles. And we're seeing gay, LGBTQ plus people, get in the film industry. But a lot of people don't really think about behind the camera and like what goes on and how everything is edited, directed, all kinds of stuff. And one of the big ones that people really actually knew about was the Black Panther movie, where they were like, oh, the directors and the writers and stuff like that. So tell us how, you kind of got started in this creating the Handy Foundation. Like, what made you create the Handy Foundation?
Well, I don't think that there's one thing that I didn't really realize until a couple years ago, and really even more over the last year. Being someone that's always been working in the business, I've been kind of like a fish in water, right? Like, I understand how the business works. I know how you can navigate it. But Hollywood is a bit of a mystery to most people that don't work in the industry. Unlike becoming a lawyer or a doctor or an engineer, you can pretty much go on Google. You can research the degrees and classes and residencies you should get for those jobs. And it's a lot easier to understand what to do. Doesn't mean it's easy to do, right? No, everyone may know what it takes to become a surgeon, but doesn't mean everyone's prepared to do everything that it takes to become a surgeon or a lawyer, et cetera. But with Hollywood, there are so many jobs that people don't even know about. And so, like, we've all seen Oscars So White and a lot of the different movements that happen, but a lot of it really had to do with what we could see from Hollywood, which was who's directing, who's acting in it, what stories are being told. So a lot of the diversity movements in Hollywood have been focused on the storytellers and the actors, right?
Would you say it's more surface level?
Yeah, it's more surface level, but it's also more so what you can see, right? Like, we can see from the outside looking in how a company like Facebook or Google works, so we think, right? We see the public-facing part of that company, but we don't know all the details of what happens behind the scenes. We don't know all the job titles inside the company necessarily, right? And what those functions are. especially as they're doing R&D and they're developing things. They may have people doing things that they don't want anyone to know who they are because they're still figuring it out. And what's interesting is Hollywood has some parts like that, right? Where you're developing content, you're creating content. You know, when you sign up to be a production assistant or a producer on a reality show, right? Mm-hmm. Like you're working on Survivor, right?
Yeah.
Like you have to sign an NDA, right? Yeah. Right? Like you can say you're working on Survivor, but you can't say who's going to win next week, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, there's a little bit of that in Hollywood that people don't realize. And the other piece to that is that there's a lot of gatekeeping that's happened over the years with different behind the scenes positions. But the bottom line the thing that I know is that every shoot you do, like every movie you might see, you know, has a large crew. You know what I mean? Like the average film may have big budget film may have like 500 people on the crew. That's not including the director, the writer, right. You know, the actors. Those people that you know their names and you see on camera may account for like a dozen people in a project, right? And then there's still another 500 plus people behind the scenes. And a lot of those jobs are paying multiple six figures, right? Yeah. There's a lot of millionaires in Hollywood that do very well just doing color correction, just doing audio mixing, just doing editing, right? Or running a vendor that services one of the companies, right? It's a whole industry, and it's one of the largest in the state of California, right? Which is one of the largest economies in the U.S., one of the largest economies in the world, right? And so the bottom line of how the Handy Foundation started is I simply was looking for black editors for one of the vendors that was trying to diversify their personal staff, but it became, you know, very viral because there was a lot of negative comments. Because I do feel like some of the folks that have grown up in this industry, like me, but maybe, you know, come from a different background as me, they, you know, a lot of the white folks in that particular chat like really felt like, oh, it wasn't fair that they were only looking for black people for this particular opportunity. And they had a lot of negative comments that went viral, got retweeted by other folks, and became a Los Angeles Times article.
Blew up in the
news and everything. But it put me in a position because all these microphones in your face, with, you know, all these outlets wanting to know what you think, and they just want, you know, to understand what happened and tell the story of the day. But the story was bigger than that to me, because what I realized was, I think we all think there's someone out there working on a problem, right? Like there's the Red Cross, they got it, or, you know, this other organization, they got it. There's a lot of nonprofits that exist to solve problems in the world. And what I realized was this particular problem, there was no nonprofit that was really solving it, specifically for below the line jobs in post-production, which in unscripted television is where all the jobs and all the money is, right? So almost 75% of unscripted money, right, on unscripted shows, that's nonfiction, documentaries, reality TV, is all spent in post-production.
Yeah.
Right? Most of our television shows are unscripted because scripted is more expensive. So I was able to really dive into the numbers. You know, we compiled this list of black editors and quickly realized that even if every single reality show wanted one black editor, there weren't enough with experience or that had credits to even get that many people hired. Like, I think the list of shows we did last year, it's like 1,700 shows, right, across, I don't know how many networks there are today, but it's a lot of them. And our list of black editors, and this is like from film to unscripted to like all the viral activity. I mean, I'm sure there's people out there that are editing professionally that we didn't have on our list, but we had a pretty comprehensive list, and it was only like 400 people.
Yeah.
Right? And the union people were like less than half of that. And there's 8,000 members in the union, which basically means that we're less than 1%.
Yeah. And I think we should clarify, because a lot of people who don't understand post-production think like maybe there's like an editor or two on shows, but like some shows have like 5, 6, 7 editors.
Yeah.
And then they have a ton of assistant editors and a bunch of other, you know, things. So when you say like 400 people, I mean, that's like a really small number that, you know, people need to kind of grasp.
Yeah. I'll give you one stat that black people don't realize, like America's Got Talent, or The Voice, for instance. The Voice is a good example. 20 editors, 15 assistants. right? That's just on one show. And there's a lot of shows, reality shows. Most reality shows are going to have anywhere from 4 to 8 editors.
Yeah.
And at least a few assistants.
And so did you see, after this happened with you, there was this racial outcry, and then you started the Handy Foundation. Did you see a lot of, other like networks and studios that were like wanting to help and wanted to get involved and, wanted to, diversify, their offices to show that, they care about diversity in America and in their companies?
I'm going to say this. I was really able to see who was genuinely wanting to. There's three parts to this. There is a lot. Everybody, I think, has good intentions. Mm-hmm. Not everybody knows how to do it, though. Not everybody knows how to get to the results that they want to get, and they also don't want to disrupt their for-profit business, especially when it's publicly traded. They can't afford to do that. So what I've seen is a lot of slow movement from the very largest companies, because there's a lot of red tape when you have a huge company. And not only is there a lot of red tape, but what people don't realize about the industry is NBC doesn't hire all the editors for America's Got Talent. Mm-hmm. As a company called Fremantle, right? And so what we did first was go to the production companies, because the production companies are the ones that really hire everyone. Yeah. And the production companies were getting a lot of pressure from the networks to fix this problem, right? But it's not like the networks would just like broke down and gave everyone extra resources, right, to fix this problem. They just was like, all right, well, it's a problem. It's in the public. Fix it on your own kind of thing. And so it was very fragmented in the beginning. There's a lot of people getting a lot of information from a lot of different people. And unfortunately, with advocacy organizations, most advocacy organizations just kind of, that's what they do. They advocate. They kind of, give you the bullhorn activity. This is what you need to do. But they, again, aren't all these organizations aren't always giving you all the resources. They may give you a list. But what we did that was different is that we are like, we noticed immediately a lot of these folks were just exchanging the same people. They're taking people from a reality show, putting them on a scripted show. Taking people from scripted shows, putting them on a big movie, right? And then you have all these shows that are like scrambling to diversify too, at the lower budget levels, and they're not able to find people because all their people have now moved up. And so that was a lot of what was happening in 2020. A lot of these lists gave people access to people, but a lot of people got a lot of calls. So what we did was we trained people. We trained new people to give them skills and give them access where they've never been accessed before. Because prior to our foundation, if you were someone that didn't know anyone in the business, you really didn't have a way to get started, right? And even further than that, if you're a production assistant working on a show, you may not have a way to get to the next level, right? And that's where we come in. We actually train people and prepare them for the next level, and we actually have partnerships where we have jobs waiting for them once they finish the program. And so I think that's the key difference of what we brought to the table that wasn't existing before.
And so how many, people have gone through, the Handy Foundation so far? Would you say, it's a few hundred,
It's 122, and 89 of them have been placed on jobs. And the people that haven't been placed just finished the program in the last 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so how often do you do, these training sessions, and like, do you just offer assistant editing? Is there, other things that you offer?
Yeah, we started with assisting editing as the first program, but in January we're rolling out 5 others. And we already rolled out one, So we rolled out the virtual production program, which is where we teach Unreal Engine, which is what you use to build like gaming engine like Fortnite.
And you see that in like Star Wars and stuff.
Yeah, but you also see that they use that to build the sets and the worlds in a lot of the movies. Yeah. Because there's no Death Star that really exists somewhere, right? It's all digitally created. Yeah. Right? So that kind of stuff, and then we did assistant editing, virtual production program. We're going to do a DIT program, which is a digital imaging technician. We're going to do we're doing a hair and makeup program, launching the application this month. We're doing a post production coordinator and supervisor program, and then lastly, we're doing an audio mixing program as well.
Well, that's good. So you basically diversifying and trying to expand and give more people opportunities, not just for assistant editing jobs. Overall, like, what is your main goal in the sense of where you want to see the Handy Foundation, like, let's say 5 years? Like, what's your top of the line goal?
Well, okay, so I do this kind of talk about the history of our business, and there's a new innovation every year, right? Mm-hmm. There's a new innovation in the technology or in the processes that we use. Like, even the cameras you have here are all recording digitally, right? There's no videotape, right?
Yeah.
So unfortunately, in education, we haven't really had many innovations. There's no TV school. Most people go to film school and learn how to be one of three jobs, right? Director, writer, producer. And no one's really teaching in all these other hundreds of jobs that exist, right? And those jobs are being created and invented every day. So, to answer your question, we want to create an annualized program that all the educators can participate in and get updated on what's going on in the industry, so that they're actually teaching what the kids need to know to get jobs. Because right now, our whole educational society is based on this model of going to school for 12 years, then going to bachelor's for 4 years and discovering a major out of that. Well, most of those majors don't actually translate to a job that requires a skill.
And we have so many people now, especially with the student debt crisis that's been going on, is so many people just go to school to get a degree rather than going to school to get a degree that they're interested in and use.
Well, see, I grew up in Germany, right? And here's the thing: when your college system is not based on building it on the backs of your citizens and putting them in debt so that your institutions can survive, right? Because they're for-profit institutions. When you create institutions that are, free, like college used to be free when my mom was young, right? Like community college should still be free for everybody. It should be like high school, but it's not. In Germany, though, you don't go to a 4-year bachelor program if you don't have a job that you're training for that requires it, right? So sometimes if you're going for a job that requires this baseline education to then get a master's or PhD to then do that job, then that makes sense. But if you're going to be a mechanic, right, that's not frowned upon. You know what I mean? It's a trade school. You go to trade school, you learn that trade, you go run the mechanic shop. Right. And so there's, something happened to our educational system where it now feels like every single kid in America is expected to become a doctor. Yeah. When it's like, well, you still need the nurse's assistant, you still need the receptionist, you still need the people that are going to fix the equipment that the doctor works on, right? You need somebody that's going to run the teleprompter or the court reporter, all these jobs that don't require degrees, but require specific skills, right? So I think that we need to start to broaden out our educational system to address all the jobs in the industry. It doesn't mean that you can't scale up or level up from any of those jobs, but it doesn't mean that every 18-year-old has to go to a 4-year college.
Yeah. And so, the biggest takeaway from that is, so many people need to understand that, like, the film industry, like you said, is somewhere where people can make 6 figures, people can make, 7 figures, all kinds of crazy money, and you don't have to have a degree.
Well, and here's what it is. Some industries are certificate-based industries, right? You need this certificate to prove that you could do this job. Yeah. And some industries are competency-based, meaning you can actually continue to level up in that business the more competent you become about the technology. Now, here's the catch. The technology changes so fast that this is the one of the few industries you could jump in today and learn something like Unreal Engine and outpace everybody in 2 years, because everybody's learning Unreal Engine for film right now. Yeah. Even the most seasoned professionals are only like a year in to learning that software, right? So if you're young and you're just now learning it, this is exactly. Have you read a book called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell?
I've heard about it.
It's recommended reading for everybody, that I would say. He specifically talks about Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, right? And those folks, they were all born between 1957 and 1960. Now, why is that important? Because by the time they were like 19, 20, 21 years old, that's when the personal computer came out. So if you were already working on these big supercomputers in these big rooms and that was like you were locked in, it's going to be very hard for you to like pivot to these new personal computer things because you don't know if that's going to work out.
Yeah.
Right. However, if you're young, you can pivot to this new technology, a personal computer, and you can start your own personal computer company. Maybe you call it Apple, right? Maybe you call it Microsoft. And then 10, 15 years later, now you're the leader in the whole industry.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the opportunity when there's innovations that happen in your industry. And that's the opportunity right now in Hollywood.
Yeah. And so basically, what are some of the like platforms besides, Unreal Engine that like are taught in the industry? What are things that, if someone who's aspiring, like watching this to get into the industry and wants to join the Handy Foundation, like what are some things they have to then know? And
well, I would just tell you the jobs where the most opportunities are right now are in anybody that wants to get into production accounting, understanding the budgeting software, Movie Magic, right? Understanding how to build cost reports and do payroll and stuff like that. Like it seems like not maybe exciting, but if you control the money and you understand how the money moves in the industry, then you actually have an insight into every aspect of the business.
Yeah.
2, visual effects, right? So Unreal Engine is just one software, but really understanding Adobe, After Effects, understanding Mocha, and there's hundreds of softwares where you can do visual effects, but they all kind of, just like editing softwares, kind of work off the same premises, right?
Yeah.
C++ is what I was told by Pixar. Is like, hey, we would love to have interns that we can teach, kind of our process and our animation process, but like the basic understanding of coding in C++ is like a starting point, right? If you don't know that information, it might not be, it may be really difficult for you to get in there and really actually, it's like not knowing the rules to basketball, but you're trying to play in the game.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, doesn't mean you're going to be Michael Jordan, but you at least got to know that's the free throw line, that's the 3-point line, this is the baseline, this is the hoop, so you got to know that. And that's really what they say. The basics of coding is important to know too.
You guys were talking about Unreal Engine and particularly how Disney uses volume. Do you where do you see that going in the future, and where do you think the next sort of big innovation in the movie industry will be that's like sort of similar to that?
Well, everything is going more and more virtual, right? So anything that people can do through AI and anything that people can do without actually building a big building, right? Or having a big, like everything's going to be a little bit smaller, a little bit more compact, and a little bit easier to manage. You'll still have your big blockbuster features, right? But I'm going to tell you something that's happening in the business. I know a few circumstances where the director that they want to direct this film doesn't know anything about animation or doesn't know anything about visual effects, right? This is an interesting paradigm because you want to hire these people with this experience and this names, but they also don't understand the technology and how to maximize it, right? Like, a crazy story, a guy that, have you ever seen this film Rango?
Yeah.
So the guy that directed Rango, he didn't really do animation. So what his process was he shot the whole film like a feature film. Like he shot it like a real live action film and then had the animators animate it. Now, I don't know the whole backstory as to why that was the agreement for that, but I do know that it happened. And I don't think that that's a sustainable model, right? Like, I think that you're going to start to see people that understand and know the technology being able to step into these leadership roles and direct the film and write the film and things like that. So I think that the days of like the leadership of a production not really being familiar with the technology, I think that's going to become a less and less of thing, right? That we'll see. So that's one thing. 2, I do think that there's going to be a lot more immersive media, AR, more experiential media. But I don't think that. I think that I think it's a whole category unto itself. I do think that the technology can be used. Like I know people that have used Unreal Engine to design practical spaces, right? So like now you don't have to rent a house; you can just build a house in Unreal and then shoot it, and no one will know the difference, right? And then it's cheaper because a lot of these, sets they're already pre-built. So those are the kind of things I think you're going to see. And I think our palette for like watching things that are more digital looking, more animated looking will increase to where you know, to where they will be more accepting, right?
Definitely, because I mean, the thing about Unreal Engine is it's becoming more and more real. Like, it's crazy how, like, you know, when I was a kid playing video games, like, you could tell, like, oh, it's a video game. Like, now it's getting to the point where it's like, there's no way you could tell, especially on video. Like,
for real.
That's
Like Madden is a good example how good the graphics have gotten on Madden and 2K. Like, a lot of times when I walk in a room and somebody's playing Madden or 2K, I gotta like double take. Like, is this a real game or is it a video game? I'm like, okay, that's
in the Batman, the sunrise scene where he was talking to Catwoman. I think that whole background was virtual, and they took pictures of it. I think they used the volume technology for that. So like, you can't really tell.
Yeah, especially now with Star Wars. Like, I mean, I watched The Mandalorian. I couldn't even tell that it was, you know, shot on a massive digital screen. Like, and it's insane. And like, that's the way that everything's going.
Have you guys seen? You should look this up too. You can probably find it on YouTube. But if you look at, have you seen Winning Time with Magic Johnson?
No, I haven't.
So that was one of the dopest things I've seen for virtual, because basically they're shooting this stadium in the 70s, right? One, they can't really recreate it. Two, to do a scene like that back in the day, you would have to get, maybe you wouldn't fill up the whole stadium, but you would fill up like, you know, 1,000 extras or 500 extras at least on one side. So when you shoot the shot, you could, so it was like, it used to be this massive undertaking. And so you gotta think they're recreating Showtime Lakers basketball, you know, but then there's a video online of them shooting scenes in like basically a small set that's a gym with like maybe 50 to 100 extras like on the sidelines rooting, and everything behind them was green screen, right? Wow. And so literally you have like the guy playing Magic Johnson coming down the court like it's a big game, and it looks very small and like a little high school gym with the green screen. But then when you populate the green screen with this whole stadium, it's like instantly it turns into like 10,000, 20, like 50,000 people watching, you know?
It's pretty insane.
How do you feel about bigger productions like Marvel and Black Panther and Shang-Chi using primarily black or Asian crew members, or they do it from casting, cast, crew, and I think most of the time all the way down to writing and sometimes editors? I'd have to check on that part. How do you?
Yeah, I think anyone that's doing a film, movie, or TV show about any culture, and they're not checking in with the people from that culture, is a very arrogant move, right? I would not dare tell someone's story that I have no relationship to. It's just about being responsible. I'll give you an example. I would consider that responsible filmmaking, right? Like, and I've always done that. If I'm telling stories about the music industry or about Atlanta, right, I get people from that city or from that culture to contribute either as producers or consultants or things like that, and also editors and staff and talent. You want people that are familiar with the culture, right? Like, you don't want someone editing a Spanish language show that doesn't speak Spanish.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want someone that is so I think because this is an art form, an expression of culture, a lot of these stories, you got to have the people from the culture involved. But what often happens though is you don't have a Ryan Coogler at the helm that actually maybe has done projects utilizing, you know, all black staff. He's from Oakland. I'm from Oakland. It's a different vibe, you know, in certain cities. Some people may come from a different environment where they haven't been around a lot of black people, even as a black person. And so they may not feel like they know people, you know what I mean? Or they don't have those relationships. But I do think you have to make an effort, right?
Right.
And so what I would encourage anyone that gets the opportunity to show, run, direct, etc., like, you got to be involved in every department. A lot of times we come from like let's say I come from writing. I'm a writer, and I don't know anything about post-production. I don't know anything about visual effects. So I'm gonna let the studio handle that part or someone else handle that part. And then what happens is that department is filled with people that may not understand the culture, and so you do have to take more time to seek out those people in every department. And so I applaud the programs that do that, right? and we still got a long way to go. Like, as many black people might have worked on Black Panther, for example, the editor, for example, just has a long track record with doing Marvel stuff, right? And he happened to be a white guy, did a great job, but it wasn't like just because majority, cast and maybe a lot of the crew were black. Doesn't mean that the whole crew is black or the whole crew is Asian or Latino, right? Like, it just means that they're a part of the process too.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's really what you're, shooting for, is not like to take over the industry in the sense of pushing
we just
people
gotta
out.
all work together.
Yeah, just allowing for more diversity, essentially.
Exactly.
Because so many people now, especially with certain responses, especially like some of the things that you got, was like they felt that it was racist, like reverse racism. They're pushing people out of the industry, all kinds of stuff like that. When in reality, it's like so many jobs are being created.
Yeah.
Well, not only that though, a lot of people don't realize, like, the reason why we started the assistant editor program is because with everyone working remotely and and our amount of content we're making in our industry increasing by 400%. I mean, I think a good 25 to 30% of the assistant editors that we knew, we knew at the time, were all double or triple dipping because they were working from home, but there also was that big of a need that, like, for instance, you could be doing a big network show, right? I know for a fact some big network shows where it was like they would rather take an experienced person part-time double dipping than a new person with no training, right? Because then you don't want, it's like your baby. You don't want it to get messed up.
Yeah.
And so that's why our training program was a big hit, because those people that were like, man, I don't really have a lot of good choices, right? It's like sometimes in political campaigns when you're like, man, it really no good choices, right? There's more people out there that could do the job, but they just didn't have the millions of dollars or the support to run.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so now you got these two terrible choices of people. I'm not going to mention no particular race, right? But that happens to us all the time, and that's what happens in Hollywood every day.
Yeah.
Is that you just have only a few choices of people because not that many people know how to do the job.
Yeah. Would you say that politicians, especially in the state of California, have like drawn light on some of these issues and companies and are trying to make an effort and stuff to
what I found? What I realized,
inclusivity?
unfortunately, at every company, even the ones that have been great partners, and even in my own organization, it really feels like everyone kind of has the thing they really want to do, the thing they're really excited about, the thing they're going to volunteer. I'm going to lead that project. But it's very rare that you find that like everybody's on the same page, everyone's giving equal effort. So like I think the same thing with politics, right? Like, oftentimes what I actually find that happens is that everyone has like that thing they want to do, like the thing they're super passionate about.
Yeah.
And they can't wait to get into position to do that. And so, unfortunately, a lot of politicians, they have an agenda from that dates way before they got elected, right? They have a mission, a goal, and, hopefully that goal lines up with what the city needs, but sometimes it doesn't, or the government needs. And I will tell you one other thing. Unfortunately, it's a lot to know to be a politician, right? There's a lot of things to educate yourself on. So that's one of the things that we're doing next, is really helping to educate everyone on our industry and how it works so that they can, make choices that are informed. Exactly.
So who are some of these people that, you've talked to, some of these companies, some of these, celebrities that, you've started to work with to, get this out there that, you're trying to increase diversity in Hollywood and you're trying to, make an effort to make a positive change in society?
Well, the good news is I think we made an impact, and we've definitely increased the level of diversity in Local 700, which is the Editors Guild. I mean, I would say nearly 30 to 40% of our trainees are either in the union or on the roster.
Yeah.
And that number is just going to continue to increase. So at the end of the day, we have increased diversity, but we have a long way to go. And some of our partners that have been working with us on this for the last 2 years include like Lionsgate, Apple, all the Stars shows, have taken on, one or more of our apprentices. Even the Lionsgate feature films, we just placed someone on the Hunger Games prequel. Matter of fact, Courtney, who was in your cohort, did you know that?
No, I didn't. I haven't
she just
talked
got
to her in
that.
a while.
Yeah, she just got that gig. So I think she started this Monday. And then, ITV, and the production company wise, it's been ITV and Fremantle. So like ITV does like Queer Eye for a Straight Guy for Netflix, right? And Fremantle does like, shows like what is it called? Not Price is Right, but the other one. Come On Down. Is that Price? No, with the guy.
Steve Harvey?
No, the guy from, maybe it is Price is Right.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Where
So
he grabs people from the
yeah,
audience.
for the audience. Yeah. So Price is Right. A lot of BET shows for A. Smith. Nailed It and Top Chef with Magical Elves. Bruna Murray, which they do The Challenge in the Real World, and a ton of shows over there. 44 Blue. So a lot of the production companies that maybe you haven't heard of, but you've seen their logo on the end of the TV shows. We've been working with them. So, we're upwards of 25 production partners and a few studios.
That's good.
That's really good. How is Sunwise Media going?
So, okay. So Sunwise Media is, my production company.
Right.
Started it in 2018 for real, to do syndication was my first plan. And we did syndicate some programs. One we did was Unsolved History, Life of a King, which was about a little known story. A lot of people didn't know that Martin Luther King Jr. had a brother.
Mm-hmm.
You know his brother, A.D. King?
No.
Not familiar?
I know he had a brother. I'm not familiar with him.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize, he was kind of quiet, but he was also a minister. He was one of the ministers in Birmingham, which is why they they were able to come there and move so easily through the city, because his brother had the connections, with all the other ministers. Also, he was found dead in his pool 15 months after Martin Luther King died. They said he drowned in his own pool that he swam in every morning.
So he's probably killed too, just like, okay.
I didn't got to go into it, but that's what the hour-long special was about, really looking at his life and his death. But at the end of the day, I want to create programming that tells our stories with Sunwise Media. What I realize is, a lot of what we think is shaped by who's telling the stories. And unfortunately, we haven't been in the leadership positions to really greenlight and control our own narratives. And so now I have to find myself constantly, teaching things to my sons directly, because there really isn't any media out there that helps them discover their stories on their own, right? And so our company is really dedicated to, sharing stories that are important for us, sharing information that's important for us, and not necessarily just Black folks, but just BIPOC folks in general, folks that are underserved, who in America don't get, we get very little time to really tell. We have to have, a lot more opportunities to tell the vastness of our stories.
Yeah, I was speaking on what you were just talking about. I was people telling their own stories or bringing other stories back to life or to the light. I went to a World War II museum, and I read one of in the exhibition, one of the things that I had read was something on a soldier named Medicine Crow. You guys know who that is?
Mm-mm.
He was a Native American soldier he was brutal, and he did a lot, and it goes into his whole life, not the whole exhibit, but that one portion of the exhibit went into his whole life and how he had gone to school, got his master's degree and all that stuff, and he had lived all the way up until the Obama era and how he had gotten honored. And there was also another thing about, what was it? I can't remember the name of the unit, but there was a unit of Japanese men who were in internment camps, and rather than being in internment camps, they volunteered to go out into war and got shipped off to Europe, and they also killed a lot of people. Obviously, they had to go to Europe because you can't, having a U.S.-Japanese unit in Japan and Okinawa. There's
segregation and all kinds of stuff.
Well, you don't want to send the Japanese to fight the Japanese, basically.
No one would know what was up. So it was just one of those things where it was I never knew about that, and I'm in my 20s now, and that was never taught in schools. So to add on to what you were saying earlier.
What's crazy is that if you think about it, the further we go in the world, there's a lot more history to know, right?
Right.
There's new history being created every day. So you really can't understand everything, but I do think this is important. I think everyone should have context for how they got where they are today.
100%.
And unfortunately, like, we're not even doing that well, right? Like there's a whole battle right now against even people understanding the transatlantic slave trade in schools, right?
Yeah, because there's so many districts that are trying to exclude it from teaching entirely.
Right.
Yeah.
And because
now,
of
what would be the
critical race
motivation
theories-
for that, right? The motivation for that is, well, I'm sure there's a lot of individual motivations for it. And
Yeah.
people may tell themselves stories about it. But look, if my son is going to be in a public school, he needs to have information about where he comes from and how he got there.
Yeah.
And I grew up in Germany, like I said before. Learning about the cultures and the history of the culture is a staple in learning, right? Like, they learn languages at a young age, right? And it's about learning about the people in your community, the people that you interact with. So if you live in a community that's predominantly Black, Latino, and European, right? You should be learning about those places.
Yeah.
And you should be learning about how those people got to that community.
Yeah, definitely. I do think that the reason why, that's such a big issue nowadays is critical race theory has been like a big issue.
Critical
and,
race theory has many different
and I think
forms
a lot of people don't
interpretation.
understand what critical race theory is, and they're using it as a way to kind of like push the past of America's wrongdoings out of the history books. Even I have a friend who I work with on Survivor, and he was like, yeah, like my little cousin didn't know slavery existed. Like, when we told him about it, he thought we were joking, something like that. So
Yeah.
it's that thing of, nowadays I know that there's so many people on different political sides that, are trying to downplay things and make it seem like, issues aren't as bad as they are. But, there's still a long way to go. There's still racism in America. There's still inequality. And, it's good to see someone is, stepping up and trying to, make a change in a specific industry to, help. Not like, obviously you're not trying to push people out. You're just trying to increase the diversity in the industry and help people. And I wish that we saw that in so many different areas across America, because, we see so many like multimillionaires now when it comes to like the Black community, and a lot of them don't really do anything for the Black community. They make hundreds of millions of dollars, football players, basketball players, and they complain about the issues, but they don't do anything.
Yeah.
And I forgot there's a basketball player. He played for, I think he played for the Bulls, and he went viral because he was talking about this same thing where, like, we need to take responsibility and stop complaining about things and,
Actually
make a
do
change.
something,
Yeah,
yeah.
make an actual change in our communities.
I think there's a couple of pieces to that, right? Like, you can't be going cleaning up somebody else's house if your house ain't clean.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you wanna start, everything starts at home. But then also, I do think too, a lot of people don't know where to put their resources. Like, if you have millions of dollars, right, and you want to help, there's going to be a lot of people with their hands out. There'll be a lot of people saying, I can help you do this, help you do that. And, you got to be careful, right? And so I think there's some folks that do get a little shut down, and they just, I'm going to just do my own thing, kind of pick my own thing. And what I realized, though, is that people tend to help out in industries that they're familiar with. Like, I'm familiar with the industry that I'm in, right?
Yeah.
And there's going to be industries that I can't really contribute to, right? Because I don't really know a lot about that. And so what I do think we have to do is start in our industry, start in our community, start in our homes. And, a lot of times you'll look around. For example, let's say that you're at your house and there's some, stuff spilled on the floor, right? Well, if you live alone, ain't nobody else gonna pick that up but you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Right? And let's say maybe you live with your wife or your girlfriend, or maybe you got a roommate. Like, well, now it's between the two of you. But at some point, somebody got to decide, okay, I'm gonna just knock this out because it needs to get done. And that's really what has to happen with all of these different, issues, right? Like, someone has to step up and say, okay, guys, I'm gonna solve this problem.
And do you think, with the recent Black Lives Matter organization controversies, that, so many people finally got to the table and were ready to help the Black community, and with all the recent, things going on with the Black Lives Matter organization, do you think that they've done more harm than good when it comes to?
Well, here's what I think, and this is important, and this is probably the most important thing. I don't come from the nonprofit space, right? But what I did do was I surrounded myself with people that had a lot of experience, and I actually dedicated the time to it. Like, I actually didn't make any money in 2020 or 2021 specifically, because I was 100% focused on building this nonprofit, but also making sure I educated myself on what we needed to do, right? Fortunately, because I'm a reality TV producer, I have a lot of contacts. Like, the one thing about being a reality TV producer and developing shows, I've developed shows about everything you could imagine, right? So in my Rolodex, I have a long list of people I can just call up and say, hey, I don't understand this. Do you know about this? And so I had a lot of people I could call. I think a lot of times we know there's a problem. We know that there's a solution, and we maybe even know how to get started on building that solution. Or we may, like with Black Lives Matter, get ourselves in a position where we can be kind of the conduit into the community to a problem for a lot of people. But that doesn't always mean that we are in the best position to run that organization, or to build sustainability around the organization, or even have a plan. And I think that some of these things take time to develop. But unfortunately, in our community, we don't have that institutional, generational knowledge, right? Like, I'm going to tell you something that people don't really realize. Like, so in 1865, right, Emancipation Proclamation gets signed. Mm-hmm. A few years later, black folks start to get to know that they're free, right? And the word gets around. There's a lot of newspaper articles. That's where you start to get words like gospel music and family reunion and things like that, because, one, this is the music that we're singing, right? And so we're doing these celebrations. We're bringing our families back together. I know for my family, for instance, it took almost 40 years to get all of our family members back together that we even knew about, right? Through the slave trade and all that. But during that time, from 1865 to roughly 1920, black people filed for more patents than they have in the last 100 years, right? So what does that fact tell you? Well, it tells you that in 1865, Lincoln created the Freedmen's Bank. You had Frederick Douglass. We're depositing money into the bank. We moved to PG County, which is still one of the wealthiest areas for black folks. We felt free. We were becoming politicians. We were getting into government. We were voting.
We're hustlers,
right?
Man.
Right. We were just one generation out of slavery. We was crushing it. We had Black Wall Street. We're building hotels and things like that. And so what happened then is the same thing that's happening now, right? Black folks are starting to prosper, and institutionally, it didn't work for the system, right? The system started to rage against this black wealth, this black joy, this black commerce, right? So what happens?
Wall Street got burned down.
Or they burned down that's like literally that'd be like us going to burn down Manhattan 30 years after it started and saying, we don't want you to build a city here. Yeah. Right? We don't want you to build wealth here, right? But then from 1920 to 1960, we started getting all these Jim Crow laws that actually prevented us from participating in commerce, right? Black folks working under the table doing house cleaning or whatever, saving money for 20 years to then eventually afford to buy a house, bringing that cash to the bank, and the bank saying, well, if you don't have receipts for all this, how do I know you didn't steal it, and taking their money, right? These are the common stories that we have. So we have a whole nation against us for years, from my grandmother's generation. And so what people don't really realize is that, yes, the Civil Rights Act was passed in the 60s, right? And the 57 and 60s and Housing Rights Act and all those things.
But they were
litigated. They were litigated all the way to the 70s.
Yeah.
Right? They were litigated all the way to the Supreme Court to the 70s.
Cultural change.
And so it took a while for a lot of that to be enforced nationwide. And the reason why the Supreme Court finally decided that actually this one particular lawsuit that got claimed all the way to the top was like, yes, you can choose what customers, who you want to serve, but you cannot exclude an entire group of people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why, here's the reason why, is the Supreme Court decision explained that actually was denying the government of their right to collect taxes from those consumers, because you're forcing those consumers to go into like an underground, kind of black market situation where we get the green book. It was
all about money for them.
That was why the decision got made. It wasn't because it was the right thing to do or anything like that. It was like, oh no, well, we can't collect commerce and taxes and sales tax off of these folks if they're not able to do business with you, right? Yeah. And so you just want to understand that I was born in the 70s, right? I'm 40 something years old, right? I'm 43 years old. So basically up until my lifetime, we weren't even able to really fully move around the city freely. I mean, country freely like that.
Yeah. Would you definitely say that, it's beginning to improve, and it's come a long way from, what it was in the past?
Well, it goes back to what we were talking about before. As much as there are individuals in this world that are committed to diversity and inclusion and accessibility and love for everyone, there are people that are committed to the opposite.
Yeah.
They want to make sure that their business and their industry and their think about this. If you're born into a family where your father, your grandfather, your great grandfather, have carved out an industry for themselves, they're the leader in something, right? Mm-hmm. And you feel like in your generation is getting chipped away, right? You're going to be conservative about it, even though you may be outpacing everyone in your community. You still feel like you're losing because you have less than your grandfather, your great grandfather did, and really, that's really what the big battle, right? Like conservative people want to keep everything the same, and people that are innovating is like, no, you just got to create new stuff. You got to innovate new products. One of the greatest examples of that is Motorola, right? Mm-hmm. Motorola was a leader in communications for 75 years.
Where are they now?
Well, Google bought them within 7 years of existing.
Yeah.
Right? Because they outpaced them. It wasn't that Motorola couldn't create Google. They didn't try to. They wanted to keep the industry that they had been dominating the way it was, and the industry and the technology outpaced where they were. Blockbuster, same thing, right?
Netflix.
Blockbuster, Netflix came to Blockbuster and pitched it to them, but they didn't jump on it because innovation happens. And so that's what we need to do. We need to jump on these new innovations and outpace the competition.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring it back because I know you partially answered it, but just. My whole thing is, the Black Lives Matter organization, do you think that if it was split up between, different organizations, and if more organizations got some light, that we would, excel and see more? Because, now so many people, because of the scandals, because of the multi-million-dollar homes bought, the people getting arrested for fraud, all kinds of stuff. I feel like it's
I can tell you, the movement definitely got hurt by that, and I don't know enough about the organization to really comment deeply on internally what they should do or what they should have done or where they went wrong. I do know this, that we have to stop giving control of our organizations to folks that don't really
have the knowledge.
Well, not only not have the knowledge, but really have the best intentions.
Yeah.
A lot of times, even within my own family, right? We are quick to call a lawyer and pay a lawyer for something we don't understand versus doing the research ourselves, right? And I have this conversation with my own family, like, well, no, the thing you're paying the lawyer for, you can actually find out yourself. This is public information, right? Yeah. And so those are little things like that we really have to do, and then when we build our organizations, we need to build them from a sustainable model, from a mission-based model. I will tell you this, from outside looking in, it just seems like Black Lives Matter really caught fire in a way that they weren't even prepared for. Some companies and organizations or movements just grow in a way that you can't even control it, and you're trying to come up with ideas while the train is moving, while you're building the train tracks while the train is moving. I think that at the end of the day, what we have to do is try to get control of our narratives more. Like, I don't really know where they went wrong exactly, but I do know that what's next is to say, hey, here's the impact that we're having, right? And any nonprofit organization should be able to tell anybody from a drop of a dime, here's our impact, here's how we're changing the world. And a lot of organizations don't have that, right? Like their mission is more advocacy, and so like it's a little less tangible to say what they've done, right? Like, 'cause I see Black Lives Matter everywhere, and I don't know whether the organization paid for it, or if the, like, for instance, you have these streets like Black Lives Matter streets and things like that,
like on Hollywood Boulevard,
like in DC, and that's great. But I think that what I'd love to see them promote more is the programming and the statistics of what they've actually accomplished.
Yeah. That's the same for us, because I mean we've had so many conversations about that. It's like, obviously we support the movement, and like, it's the next step in the civil rights movement and inclusion and everything. But like, we just saw, like, from the Black Lives Matter movement, it's like, if you had $80 million, I mean, you could have done so much for the communities that you wanted to help and all kinds of stuff. So that's why I just wanted to, because you have a nonprofit, so I just wanted to know what your thoughts were.
Yes, here's the thing about nonprofits. In any business, you can treat it right for the right purpose, or you could treat it wrong and try to pull the wool over people's eyes. So I just don't know where Black Lives Matters falls in that spectrum. But just like I said, from my point of view, it was folks that had a great idea, a great mission, and a great message. But also, I do think that a lot of personal beliefs get involved, and when you do a 501c3, you do have to be clear about who you're serving, what the purpose you're serving them for, and you got to come through on those missions and show financially that you're actually serving those people. So I think that the back office stuff may have got mismanaged, but then also, it's all a PR machine, right? Like there's a lot of great organizations doing a lot of great work that never get promoted.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And so what happens with something like Black Lives Matter, because it's such in the spotlight, it's going to be under the microscope. So every mistake is going to be 10 times more promoted than every good deed.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the advice you'd give to someone where when they're offering a pitch to someone, to where it wouldn't be just a normal pitch that you've heard a bunch of times that sounds like something new to them, as opposed to something that's actually new and innovative for like a TV show or a movie or anything like that?
Yeah, I think we've all had this experience where we have an idea. We're like, man, this would be a great idea. Mm-hmm. Now, the first thing you should do, especially today, is do what?
Research
it. But what do we normally do? We Google it, right?
Right. Yeah.
I would say about 50% of the ideas I have on a daily basis that I Google, they're already out there.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think reading is fundamental, right? Like research is fundamental to anything you want to do, right? And so that's the first thing I would say, because a lot of times the idea you have has been out there. There's a term that agents have. They call it a MOP or MOP, right? Most often pitched, right? There's a ton of shows. Like, everybody will be like, yo, we should do a show like this. It's like Shark Tank with a twist. Or it's like Survivor, but it's a twist. Or it's like Real World, but it's a twist, right?
Yeah.
Or it's like Housewives, but we sisters, So that's the first thing you got to gut check, is like, not every idea is even pitchable. So ideas are great. I tell everybody, if you get ideas, just start writing them down, and then once you start writing them down, sometimes you realize, oh, this ain't that good of an idea. Yeah. Second thing is, who you're pitching to is important. You got to research also who you're pitching to, because a lot of times people will pitch shows to networks, to studios, and to producers that either A, don't have the ability, capability, or interest in doing that kind of show, right? Like, you don't go pitch Harry Potter to TLC.
Yeah.
Right?
That
would make sense.
Or HGTV, right? HGTV don't do those kind of shows, right? But then you also don't go to the cooking channel and pitch a cooking show about that they already have 5 versions of on that channel, right? So you want to understand through your research what the need, what the innovation is, what is the problem you're solving, right? So like every network has a problem. Every YouTube channel has a problem. Now here's the thing. Once you get past that, the next step is to realize, okay, I think I have a good idea. I think there's a few outlets, places, or people, an audience that would really vibe with this idea. And I don't think it's out there. I'm pretty sure it's not out there. So it's like, okay, or I really feel confident this is super different, right? But then you got to figure out medium, right? Because every story or every concept, would play out different in different mediums. Is this a podcast? Is this a documentary? Is this a reality show? Is this a movie, right? Is this a short film? Is this an educational video? Is this a YouTube channel, right? Or a social media channel? There's a lot of different ways to distribute your content, short form, long form, right? And so you really want to understand what medium you're developing it for and why, right? Like why this medium? And again, that comes down to research. What kinds of things can you point to that are similar, or you maybe just going to be innovative? And the last thing is there are categories of things that you cannot produce independently.
Yeah.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can produce an independent YouTube series. You cannot produce an independent ABC series, right? Because ABC has a quality control. They have a whole process. They have a whole system, and they're a publicly traded company.
Right.
They're owned by Disney, right? There's a lot of steps to get a show onto ABC, right? Maybe there's a little less hurdles to get a show on, like, I don't know, like a smaller network. No, because honestly, all these networks are owned by Viacom.
Yeah.
Warner Brothers. So like you got NBC, which is NBC Universal. Right. You got ABC is owned by Disney. You got CBS is owned by Viacom. You got Fox. Disney. Right.
ESPN Plus or ESPN.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of these. So then you have the cable players, right? But then a lot of them are owned by Discovery Plus or Discovery Warner, right?
Yeah.
And you have a lot of them owned by Viacom. So again, like, there's not a lot of independent opportunity to reach everyone, every market with a television series. So that's a super collaborative process. Independent filmmaking is different, right? You can go out, scrape together your money, make a small independent film festivals as an outlet, hope you get a win. But generally, I would say independent films are really a proving ground to prove your creative juices, prove your vision. And sometimes you may get an independent hit that really translates to, it's worth taking a shot. So that's your question, right? Like, are you doing an independent project, or are you doing something that requires a lot of people to buy in?
And would you say, like, nowadays, because of like streaming and all the platforms that are coming out, would you say that even though it is still hard to do by yourself, but would you say now it's opened up a lot of, avenues and things for, all kinds of people to, get their work seen now?
That was
because
of question.
Yeah. So here's the deal. The world is very noisy. So get your work seen is a very loose term, right? Mm-hmm. You can make something today, put it on your social media channel, and people will see it. There's no barrier to entry for you creating something and showing people. However, what you're really asking is, if I do something independently, can I just put it on Netflix and everybody, the whole world, can get access to it?
Yeah.
Right? And the answer is yes, right?
Right.
Because you guys remember the whole Monique situation, right? Monique had sued Netflix because they were trying not offering her a bunch of money. They weren't offering this. You don't remember this? Y'all just wasn't. Y'all a little younger, so y'all wasn't really on it yet. But I'm just giving you an example. A lot of people don't understand.
Hold on.
The difference between licensing content and producing original content.
Oh yeah, the big difference.
So this is the key to what you're asking. So essentially, if you produce something on your own and you've done it tip to tail, you've shot it, edited it, produced it, how the licensing business works. So if same thing with Warner Brothers, right? If Warner Brothers shoots, edits, produces something completely in the can with no partners, with no agreements, they got to distribute that thing themselves, right? They got to figure out the distribution for it. And then if they want to sell it to television, it's usually a percentage like of the box office is how you can set your rates, right? But it's going to be a very small percentage, right? For example, when I was at Bounce TV, we would license game shows from the Game Show Network. Now they might spend $100,000, let's say, on an episode, but we're gonna license it for like 1,000, right? Because they're gonna license it out to 200 different countries for like $1,000 to $5,000 per episode, right? For a small window. You ever see Die Hard?
Yeah.
Right? Die Hard's on TV like every day somewhere, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
Right? Especially during Christmas time.
Right.
Well, they're not charging TNT or TBS or UPN or whatever, wherever it's airing, $10 million to air that movie on TV. No, it's a very small number, but they only have a very small window. And it's almost like a rental versus a purchase, right? Like if you're going to buy a house in LA, it's going to cost you $1 million. But if you're going to rent one for a week, you might find a nice home for like $200 a day or $300 a day, right? And that's what the difference between licensing and original production is. So to get an original production, you need to be in partnership with a big studio that's going to lay out the money, or you bring in some independent money. You guys are partnering, and there's a deal that's papered on the ownership or on your payment. And most of these companies are just getting paid to produce programming, and the network or studio owns it.
Yeah.
So on the flip side of that, if you produce something independently that you own, then you're going to, basically rent it out to a bunch of different networks, a bunch of different countries, and you can rent it out forever and make a lot of money, right? Yeah. But it takes time. Like, you're not going to be able to, if you rent $1 million house, you're not going to make $1 million every time you rent it.
Yeah, definitely. And so what projects are you working on? Are you working on any like major movies, TV shows, podcasts, anything currently that you can talk about without violating any NDAs?
Well, no, I think the main thing I would share is, just tune into the Harlem Globetrotters Play It Forward on NBC every Saturday, the More You Know block, either 10 or 11 a.m., depending on your market. And it's also on Peacock. So you have Peacock app, you can watch it on there too. So we're only 2 episodes into that. It's going to be on every week this coming year. And then in addition to that, still have the Money Moves podcast, powered by Greenwood on iHeartRadio. And I have a few other things in the hopper that aren't out yet, so but just stay tapped in with my social media at Sunwise Media or at Ri-karlo, at Rikarlo everywhere, and at the Handy Foundation.
And so
at Handy Foundation.
And so with the Handy Foundation, what's like the website? So, because, there's plenty of people that are probably watching that, I want to get into the film industry. What's the process of them getting into the Handy Foundation and all that stuff?
Well, we're creating more programs now because our last program, we had like so many applicants we had to turn away. We only had 12 spots. We had 450 people apply, and most of them, could have succeeded in the program given the opportunity, but we had to, weed it down because we only can train so many people to actually then help them get a job and things like that after. And so you definitely should go to the website if you have any interest in what we're doing with the Handy Foundation. It's handyfoundation.org. And you can go to join. At the top, you can become a member and donate, or you can just join the database, because we end up getting requests for every job title in every market. And so what we'll do is we'll search our database and we'll share those folks, but also the people in our database will get notified of all the applications coming out, all the events. And coming in December and January, we'll have a bunch of new programs starting. Some of our applications actually will be opening as soon as October 24th for our DIT program, which is a digital imaging technician, and our hair and makeup program, the Glam Squad training.
I was listening to the Making Money Moves?
Money moves or money making?
Money making conversations.
Oh yeah, that was a podcast I did a while ago.
Yeah. Were you ever able to get the domino tournament up and running?
Oh yeah. So it's funny. So yeah, UDL is a league and out of Vegas that I think is a dope concept. But it's one of those things that the guy that's producing it, the guy that owns it, he wants to keep it independent and he wants to figure out, and it's an event-based business. That's the same thing with the Harlem Globetrotters, right? They're an event-based company that hasn't been on TV for 50 years, but we've figured out a way to turn their event-based company into a television show as well, and I think that's what we're working on with the UDL. So it's still in progress, but yeah, the UDL is a thing that exists. So it's not something that we made just for a TV show. We're just trying to we just partnered with them to pitch it.
Okay, cool.
Thank you again, Ri-karlo, for sitting down with us and giving us an insight into the film industry and the racial inequalities and all the things that you're trying to do to help Black and brown people get into this industry. But if you guys are listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, follow us for more podcasts coming up. And if you're on YouTube, watch this on TikTok, Instagram, whatever. Follow us, subscribe, start a war in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time.